Today, it's Local News Day, and we have a lot to talk about in terms of the Northwest media ecosystem, where the hits keep coming. And by hits, I mean layoffs. This is the latest episode of Notes from the Edge. Hi, Ryan.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm sad because we just got news about another paper in Oregon closing.
Yeah, the Roseburg News-Review in Douglas County, which is in Southern Oregon, for folks who aren't familiar, it's a very large timber county. It was like one of the biggest timber producers in Oregon back when that was, it's still a large industry, but when it was massive in the 80s and 90s, Roseburg was really a thriving part of that timber industry. And, there's probably still something like, don't 100% quote me, but I want to say there's probably like 60 to 100,000 residents who still live in that county, and the Roseburg News-Review was really like the main media source there. And yeah, I was talking to some folks who worked there, and they said yesterday morning they came in and there was pink slips on all their desks, and it said like,
So Was the paper, like a corporation? We've talked, I guess for a little, like, table setting,
Mhm.
this has been a big point of interest of yours and mine over the last few years, just as we try to figure out how to do investigative reporting in Oregon. And part of what we've found is that, like, papers are, there used to be a very vibrant system of local newspapers across the state, and slowly those have gone away for a few reasons. And one of the biggest reasons is like corporate ownership, right? So
Right.
places like Carpenter Media coming in, big conglomerates, and like shutting down newspapers. So was this
Right.
one of those?
No, in this case, this is actually a locally owned newspaper. It's owned by this company called Lotus Media. My understanding is that the person who runs that business, grew up in Southern Oregon and really bought this newspaper to, preserve it, to help it continue. And I have a letter here that was sent out to all the staff, and it says, staff, due to declining revenue, increasing print costs, and broader industry decline nationwide, the news review has reached a level of unsustainability that we can no longer overcome. As a result, the news review will be shutting down in its current form at the end of April. Um, and it goes on from there, obviously. But I think this was very sudden. I don't think, my understanding is that the paper definitely had declining readership. But that's all sort of newspapers are in this struggle to keep people buying newspapers, basically. So,
It's always so hard when to see something like that happening so suddenly because,
mm,
I'm, no business tycoon by any means, but, you would hope that there would be measures taken in advance, right? Like, maybe we don't need a print product anymore. Maybe the cost of printing is too much and most people get their
mhm,
news online. It's just, I think that we see a lot of experimentation happening in media, and some of that is good, and some of it is, dumb, where places are like, we're totally
mhm,
pivoting to video because it's the only place people get their news. Like, I don't necessarily agree with that too, but to just pink slip everyone is particularly brutal. I
yeah,
was looking at some demographics in Roseburg, and like these are some parts of the state that are poorer than many other
mhm,
parts of the state, and I think that's a huge problem when you all of a sudden don't have media there, like, in places where there's, like, income disparity, right? Like, I think we need to be making sure that there are journalists there that are understanding what people's lives are like, where they're getting jobs, what they're having to do to survive, why they stay, how a community survives, and those stories just don't get told then when a local newspaper closes.
yeah. So I was speaking to a former editor of the News Review today, and it was very interesting. I was talking to him about the Umpqua Community College shooting that happened there, I think
Mhm.
2015, so more than a decade ago now. But he was editor there then, and he talked about that shooting happens, which was a terrible mass shooting at a community college there. And, he woke up the next day and he saw, CNN flying in reporters on a helicopter. And he's like, oh, we're not even in the same ball game here. And it really struck me as like there is starting to be a stratification in media where you have the haves, the New York Times of the world, who have like a money printing machine in Wordle and all these things that they've built to support their journalism. And then you have local newspapers who are like the hearts of these communities, and nobody wants to put any money into them. It's not sexy being the local newspaper.
Yeah.
Um, and so they're closing down, and it just sort of struck me as like, oh, like there could be a world where you have a shooting like that and you don't have any local reporters covering it. You only have people coming in from elsewhere, or you don't have people coming at all, right?
Right. I'm glad you went there because this was something that I had written down knowing that like one
Mm,
of the biggest, statewide known or at least nationally known reasons why Roseburg is on the map for a lot of people is that shooting. And
mhm,
it's hilarious and perfect to me that they had a helicopter because like I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about helicopter journalism, which I think if anybody has followed me online for any period of time, they have seen me bitch and moan about helicopter journalism. As a broad definition, it's
mhm.
when things like the Roseburg shooting happen, and you don't have to have a helicopter to commit the egregious sin of helicopter journalism. But it
In
helps
this
our
case,
story if you do.
right.
But it's when, you bring in reporters to cover a situation, that the media somewhere deems to be pressing, and those reporters completely lack any local context. They
Mhm.
have no information. They have no sources on the ground. And they come in and they do a story and a lot of times get a lot of the facts wrong because they lack those things. They also can really crowd out local reporters because,
Mhm.
if you know the local journalist that works at the local newspaper, and maybe you don't love their coverage, and here comes the New York Times,
Right.
hey, who are you gonna talk to? You're gonna talk to the New York Times. So I've spoken to reporters all across the Northwest who have covered major events, who all of a sudden were boxed out from law enforcement sources and all these things because these large national and international outlets come in and just crowd out the situation, right? We saw this with the Malheur standoff. Um,
Yeah,
International reporters coming in and having no idea what was going on.
right. And, I think as you're saying, it's also like the sources are like, "Oh, I can get my name in the New York Times." Like, isn't
Exactly.
that cool? Like, and it definitely is bullshit because often, as you say, oftentimes the facts are wrong, or there's a lot of cliches or trope. A place like Roseburg, it's like a beleaguered timber town, and it's like, well, yeah, but like Roseburg also has
I
a
can
really
write the
vibrant
lead right now that they would
Roseburg
use. Yeah.
also has an extremely vibrant, like, wine economy, like, it is not
Mhm.
just, like, a timber town, right? And so there's, like,
I
all
think
these things.
based on, like, what you were saying around, like, stratification in media, what that means so, like, for a long time, I worked as a stringer for the Washington Post, like,
Mhm,
I'm grateful for that time that I was able to do that, but the only times that I got a call to write about Oregon was when things happened that the editors in DC deemed to be nationally of interest. So what
right.
were those things? Mass violence, political protests that had to do with federal politics,
Mhm.
and that's pretty much it. So, yeah, a mass shooting, anti-government standoff, a political protest when other places are less protesty, and then all of a sudden you have a whole place that gets cast in, like, these
That's a really
stereotypes.
good point, yeah.
And so I think that this is, like, one of the biggest problems with when local media goes away, right? Like, it's not just, like, you're not gonna know when things are happening in your local community. It's that y you're waiting for an editor in, you know, DC or Maryland to say, "Ah, something that happened in Roseburg is worth me
Mhm.
sending someone in to cover," and they might not get it right, and that's a huge problem, right? Like, that's not even what journalism is supposed to be.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, there's no way, like, look, if you and I were to sit here right now and be like, what are the most important stories happening in the city of Washington, D.C. at a city level? Like, we would have no fucking clue, like,
Yeah.
who the
0.
players are, what's relevant, what the dynamics are.
You and you would lean on your first like, I was in DC last summer, and I was
Right.
so hot the whole time, like, I was like, "I'm so hot. Why
Swamp
are there"
ass. That's the
like
number one problem.
so, like, this colors like, this is where, like I mean, we can get into, like, bias and stuff like that, but, like, reporters are trying to write good stories, and they have a bias, like, no matter how hard they try, and if it's like, "Well, this story needs a little bit of color to make it more
Mhm.
interesting," what are you gonna lean on? "I'm hot." Like,
Mhm.
I smell timber in the air or whatever,
Mm.
so it's like,
Right.
it's just not that's not it's the exact opposite of the kind of reporting I wanna do, and I think you
Right.
wanna do, where it's, like, in-depth, nuanced, helping people understand where they live more.
Yeah, and I think, the other thing that you and I have seen over the past, year and a half is, like, when reporting goes away, like, what fills that vacuum? It's social media, it's misinformation, it's people manipulating information to, like, gain political gain in a community, like, uh, all that stuff happens, like, it was so interesting because I was talking to this editor, and he's like, "Yeah, like, I just hope one day, if the newspaper goes away or as the newspaper goes away, people start to realize, like, all they're missing, which is, like, the reporter showing up and asking the follow-up question or, holding someone accountable or even beyond that, he was like, even, like, getting the press release and, like, he used the example of, like, I got this press release once where they said, it was some nonprofit that was having a community event. They said it was on Saturday, March 3rd or whatever, and he's like, "Well, that's Friday, like, which day is it on? Like, so I can print the correct day, so you don't have people showing up on the wrong day."
Right,
It's
yeah,
like, that's
yeah.
the unsexy stuff that, like, local reporters do that no longer exists, right?
I think this is the thing is, like, so many people that we have encountered in our reporting all across the rural West, they don't know what reporters do because they're not
Mhm.
used to seeing them anymore. So people have this Hollywood idea of what journalists do, that it's all, like, subterfuge and meeting sources in, like, parking garages or whatever, when in reality, it is a pretty arduous job.
Yeah.
Like, it is mind-numbing reading public records, checking dates, feeling shame if you get the spelling of something just slightly wrong and only you notice. Like,
Right. Right.
it's that stuff. It's like dotting the I's and crossing the T's and then doing it again another day. And so I was looking I pulled up, Northwestern University, which has one of the larger journalism schools in the country. Medill has produced this thing called the Local News Initiative over the last few years, where they're basically trying to track news deserts across the country. And what's so sad is this was produced last year in 2025, and it's already out of date in Oregon.
Mm.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think they have tried to keep on top of it, but, for example, many people watching this know our work from Columbia County, Oregon.
Right.
And right now, Columbia County is not listed as a news desert. It says it has one newspaper, the Columbia County Spotlight, which
Mhm.
is true. It absolutely has a newspaper. However, this newspaper is a corporate owned newspaper that is mostly filled with content that is not written locally, and there is one reporter at this
Right.
newspaper. So what this I think a better version of this map would be is how many reporters per capita are there? And there is one reporter in Columbia County, Oregon. One. One single
Yeah,
reporter, and she
covering
doesn't live there,
right, right,
which,
covering 80,000 residents or however many residents are in Columbia County, you know?
and this is a county that has had police scandals. It's had
Mhm.
all kinds of, you know, problems in
Political
local government. There's
Mhm.
development happening. There's a huge festival every year. I mean, there's thing after thing after thing, and there's one person there to cover it. It is
Yeah.
truly impossible to do that job. So now I look at Roseburg in Douglas County. Right now, it has Douglas County Mail as a newspaper. I went to their website yesterday. It hasn't been updated in ages.
Right.
And then you have the News-Review, which is closing at the end of April. So now you have a major county on I-5 that will have no
Well,
newspaper,
and
and I think that's notable.
and, like, what are the stories that are relevant right now? Like, the Trump administration just says, like, "Hey, we wanna start logging a shit ton more timber, and we're gonna change federal rules to allow that." Where do you think that's gonna be happening? That's gonna be happening in places like Douglas County. What does that look
Exactly.
like on the ground? Like, who's gonna be covering that, you know?
I mean, I think about earlier this year, there was a notable event in Douglas County where a man was standing on the side of I-5 trying to pull over people,
Mm,
that he
right.
thought were, that he should obtain for ICE. And that this was a story that was picked up by New York media, which, okay, it's a crazy story. I understand why rarity makes news, as they say, but you know, that story wouldn't have been covered, unless the reporters at the Roseburg paper had covered
Well,
it.
and, like, what else is behind that story, right? Like, nobody's
Yeah,
following up on nobody from the New
right.
York Post is, like, making calls to the Douglas County sheriff and being like, "What was this guy's deal? Like, send me the records on this," or whatever, you know?
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, I think this is one of my biggest frustrations with where I've seen media gone in the last, 20 some odd years that I've been doing this, is that it has become this game. Like, I always use, you've heard me say before, that youth soccer analogy where, like,
Mm,
reporters are like a bunch of kids playing youth soccer where they all chase the ball in this big group. And that's fine for freelancers like me to come along and for us to go do like a cool story after everybody's run away.
mhm.
But the problem with that mentality is that it has become that federal politics dictates all media. And so where people are throwing their subscriber dollars are at media outlets that follow the Trump administration and follow it beat by beat. And when that happens, this goes away. So, like, they're
Yeah,
not gonna come save you. Like,
I
those
I think
reporters are not coming to
I
Roseburg.
think that's an excellent point. Like, the editor I was talking to from this newspaper was like, "Look, like, I have a local paper, and at the end of the day, people come home and they're like, 'I have an hour to read news,' and, like, I have the New York Times is charging $5 and the News Review is charging $5 a month, and,
Yeah,
well, I'm just gonna give my money to the New York Times," and it's like, "Okay, yeah, like, they're excellent journalists, like, nobody's
sure.
saying, like, there's not excellent reporting coming out of that newspaper, but he made the point of, like, at the end of the day, like, what's happening is you're essentially deleting all the people at the lowest rung of the news ladder, and what people don't often realize is, like, news filters up, like, that's how news works. It filters up from the hyper local places into the regional coverage places, into the national coverage places. Suddenly, you are just, like, erasing your eyes on the ground in all these communities, and that news just is never gonna be known is what's gonna happen. The New York Times is not going to know about, the guy on the side of the road or whatever pulling people
Mhm.
over because he thinks he's ICE, because nobody's gonna report on it, right? Maybe the police put out a press release, but who's gonna pick up that press release?
Yeah, and I think that what we've seen, I think of Columbia County as a good example because very similarly to the paper in Roseburg, we were there on the last day that the Chronicle in Chief closed, a similar, 150 some odd year old paper. In the vacuum of that going away, there's still people want
Oh
information.
my
So
Leah
what
Leah,
comes is Facebook.
I get, like, 4 calls a week from people in Columbia County, like, telling
Yeah.
me, like, "Did you see this thing? When are you gonna cover this?" And I'm like, "I cannot cover Columbia County by myself." Like,
Right,
um,
right. I think
there's a
that's
desire
it.
there.
People
Yeah.
want it, and so but what we've seen happen is that groups proliferate on Facebook purporting to put out factual information. People don't like how that information is portrayed in those
Mhm,
Facebook groups, so they then start their own Facebook group
mhm,
that, gives information a different way, and there's just this kind of, like, bifurcation and trifurcation of Facebook
mhm.
groups that ends up being that people just don't have one good place to look for for news. It's scary. I think it is. I think it's really scary because in my opinion, like, so much of what journalism is holding power to account, and
Mm,
it's like, how can you hold power to account if there's nobody there to see what they're doing in the first
right,
place?
right.
Holding power to account isn't only just thinking about Donald Trump, it's thinking about mayors and county commissioners and the water board and the school board and all the things that local journalists do. It's so important.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's the thing that affects most people's lives very directly, right?
Y
Like, so yeah, it is important, and I think, there are potential solutions. I've seen all kinds of things talked about, from, giving people voucher, like the government being like, "Hey, we give everybody $50 every year and you have to spend it on a news source." Like, that's one way of addressing this. There are, bills in Oregon that have been tried and in California passed to, like, charge tech companies like, "Hey, you guys have profited off of the production of journalism. You should pay a fair share." There are different ways, and I'm sure there's a million other creative solutions. It definitely needs to be more of a systemic solution. I think right now there's a lot of onus on journalists, or like, independent journalists, to like figure it out. There's like all these contests that come up every year where it's like, we're going to throw $100,000 at this moonshot idea, which is great. Like, maybe it works. But oftentimes they don't, because, like, look, we journalists are not like super business savvy. However, all that being said, like, I do think journalists should be involved in those conversations. I think one of the
Yeah.
problems with media
Mhm.
currently is, like, journalists are not really involved in a lot of these conversations. I'm looking at, like, after they laid everybody off or gave everybody pink slips at the Roseburg paper, they, like, posted 3 jobs. They said, "We're gonna lay everybody off, like 10 to 15 people, however many it is, and we're gonna create 3 jobs that are gonna, like, be lean and mean, and, like, we're not going to do journalism anymore, but what we're going to do is, like, give the audience, like, we're an information site," is what how kind of how they described it. And one of the jobs they created was a public information specialist, and the job description, which was sent to me by a reporter there, says, like, "The public information specialist is responsible for collecting, verifying, and publishing timely and accurate community information for the platform. This role serves as a primary source of daily updates, ensuring the public has access to relevant and reliable information. Your job responsibilities are monitor and collect public information from sources such as law enforcement, government agencies, emergency services, and community organizations. Verify that information.
Wait,
Organize and manage." Dude, like, listen, what this job
what
is,
is this job?
what this job is, I guarantee you, is, we want you to collect press releases and publish them on our website, and, like, make sure they're not
Which
wrong, but,
I
like,
feel like we have to say, this is not journalism.
it's not
That is not
journalism.
journalism. I
You
think that
are
this again, like, that is not a replacement for journalism. If you are
no.
taking press releases from the local police department and publishing them, that is PR.
Yes,
That's
you're
a
doing
bulletin
PR for
board.
government. You are essentially just being an additional PR wing for your local government if you're just publishing press releases, or you're just writing stories off press releases. And, it's absurd, but, like, there are, like, people on the business side just see, like, this is like, just do that. Who gives a shit? Like, all we're gonna
Okay,
publish
sorry.
is, like,
I wanna
classifieds and
harp on
obits
this.
and press
Yeah,
releases.
because here's one thing that I think people make a mistake, is that if you're a journalist who questions how government works, it makes you like a bad person. It makes
Mhm.
you like a liberal or whatever you want it to be. Like, I think that is um a wholesale misunderstanding of what journalists do. Like, the whole point of holding power to account isn't to, like, gotcha people or, like, poke holes in how government works or get people in trouble. It's to make sure that it's working as the people, a la the readers,
Mhm.
want it to. So
Right.
if something goes wrong, I mean, think about, like, Deschutes County, where there's been all this, like, issues around the sheriff there and
Mhm.
stuff, like,
Mhm.
reporters were doing the job there to make sure that right, I mean, I don't know if you wanna talk about that at all, but, like
Sure. Yeah, so in Deschutes County, there was the sheriff's office there has had, like, drama for years and years, and this guy runs, and he's like, "I'm gonna clean this place up, blah, blah, blah." Well, like, he runs on this thing, and, like, suddenly it starts to surface that, like, he possibly lied when he was, like, applying for his job in the sheriff's office and, like, doing kind of, like, a lot of dishonesty basically in his job, and, like, this is all uncovered by reporters who are like, it's election cycle, but so, like, people are kinda like, "Oh, did you know about so and so over there?" Which is like reporters, that's what we do. It's like people people have little gripes and they tell us, and then we're like, "Okay, I'll look into that and see if that's true or not." Turns out it's true. This guy, like, lied as a police officer multiple times in court, lied about his education, like, lied about, his job in California. He didn't tell the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office about this job in California because he was fired from it for lying. And this was an elected sheriff. And guess what? Like,
Yeah,
he were drummed out of office because of reporters who are like,
and,
"No,
like,
we don't want leaders who are liars," right?
the reporters weren't saying, "Drum this person out of office." They
No,
were just saying, like, "Hey,
presenting
like,
facts.
this person lied, and if you as a populace is cool with that, okay." Like, but I think that that's it, is, like, journalists, there's, like, the old saying of, like, journalists, like, holding up the fabric of democracy, and that's
Mhm.
why. Like, I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding sometimes of what democracy is. Like, again, it's not just the Washington Post saying democracy dies in darkness or whatever. I don't
Right.
even think they can say that anymore or do. Sure,
I
or
believe it.
should they?
I believe
Um
you, Jeff.
it's understanding that, like, democracy, I mean, you and I talk about this all the time, like, democracy is people yelling at each other in a school board meeting in a
Yeah.
very small town, like, so, you know, it's probably, I mean, I can't imagine the old days when there was a reporter who could sit in every school board meeting and
Yeah.
every public works meeting and stuff like that. Those days
Well,
feel so far behind, but
it is so far behind us, and let me tell you, anytime I show up somewhere with my notebook, the people who are in charge sit up straighter. Like,
yeah,
they're like, I've had this where I showed up to court and they're like, "Uh, you didn't ask to be in court." I'm like, "It's public court. You can't tell me I can't be in court." And, like,
yeah.
I will be the asshole, and I'll just like, "I don't care. Like, what are you gonna do, arrest me?" And they're like, "No, fine. Like, you can go in." Like,
I
so
recently
it's like,
had this happen in Marion County. I was covering a trial, and it was like the people who were, in the trial, there was, whatever. And the judge looks back and is like, "Are you a law student?" And I said, "No, I'm a journalist." And she was like, "Oh, welcome." Like, what is that? I've never seen one of you before in
yeah,
my courtroom. And I think that,
exactly.
it's just sort of a funny thing where I was like, man, like, this is not, we are so far from the days of when I graduated from journalism school. So,
I
yeah,
mean, look.
I mean, I think this is another thing, like you were saying, with, like, solutions and things like that up to
Mhm,
this. Like, there is no one solution. I think that it can't rely on, like, what we're doing at the Western Edge. We're trying to supplement
mhm,
places that are already strapped for resources. Like, if they're only able to cover the public meetings, we are trying to offer, like, an investigative supplement in those
right,
places where they can't afford investigative reporting. But,
right.
that's gonna be that makes it harder for us too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, if you're the one reporter covering the county of 800 or 80,000 people, like, you can't spend, 2 months investigating a story, and so, like, yeah, maybe that's a place for us. And look, media is an ecosystem. There's all kinds of journalism, there's places for all kinds of stuff to be happening, but that being said, like, to me, the daily, like, not sexy stuff is probably the most important stuff, right? Like, it is really the foundation of all this. So I hope, you know, on local media day that people are subscribing to local media and not just ignoring that or being like, "I signed up for Axios." Like, that's not local media. Like, I appreciate it, but, like, That's not what we're talking about. You should pay like the person who writes the most I'm not saying like subscribe to boring journalism, but the person who's like willing to go do the like very boring, like this is what happened at the school board meeting, like that person needs support too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think in Oregon it's hard because we have the Oregonian and we have Oregon Public Broadcasting.
Mhm.
Both have Oregon in the name, but they are extremely Portland-centric
Yep.
places. And until those places decide to fan out and have bureaus again and things like that, like I think they should change their name.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I think that that's like it is everybody is challenged right now. I think that those places are doing the very best that they can with the
right.
resources that they have, but there's just not enough to go around statewide.
Right, like, yeah, like OPB has bureaus, like, but it's one person, right, in a lot of those places, and so,
Right.
like, that's not everything. There needs to be support locally, I think, for the people who are there, so, like, yeah, if you live in Roseburg I was trying to I mean, look, I was, like, trying to convince one of the Roseburg reporters I was talking to, I was like, "Look, man, you gotta just, like, jump in and do this yourself, like, no one's gonna do it for you," he was like, "I don't know, like, I'm just tired of this," and I get it, like, it
Yeah, I
is
get it.
hard not to have that energy or feel like, you're doing something that people just don't give a shit about, but I think once it goes away, people realize how important it is, and then they suddenly start giving a shit, right? So I hope
Yeah.
that, journalists out there that are in these news deserts realize, like, you have to advocate for yourself and be like, "Hey, what we're doing matters," it takes money to do that. Um,
Yeah, man, my heart goes out to that guy. Like, I get it. On my worst days, I'm like, I'm tired and like I'm
yeah.
tired of being poor. Like, I would
Mhm.
like for it to be for my work to run more on just like my adrenaline. Like,
Right. Right.
and so like I get it. Like I think that there's always been this falsehood for a while that like if you have a staff job in journalism, then you have the stable job. And that is not true. You could show up and there's a pink slip. I'm not saying freelancing is stable either or going out on your own, like we have, but I think I think there is a moment that we're looking at where journalists can be the owners of their own companies and it can be a journalism first operation. Maybe it's a
I think it
utopian
has
idea, but
I think it has to be. I think this is like the next iteration of journalism is journalists just doing it themselves and like not being beholden to other people or hoping that your corporate overlord, smiles upon you because I think we're past that point in
yeah,
journalism. Like I think we passed a cliff probably around 2024 when you and I kind of started getting a lot of interest in this because we could see it. It's like
yeah,
you're just deleting newspapers is what's happening. It's not layoffs, it's not slimming, it's not, making do with less resources. It's you don't exist anymore. And that's where we are. And
yeah,
so like, you know, all we can do is as reporters and editors and people who care about this stuff is say like, I'm not I'm not participating in that system anymore because it's not it's not going to get us where we need to go. Where we need to go is like hard hard focus on journalism and, bring the audience hopefully with you.
yeah. And like, isn't it crazy that that has to feel so wild? Like, I think
Yeah.
that that's one thing I think about a lot is that journalism is a really unique profession in that, like, if you went to school for journalism, you got radicalized. Like, you were
Mhm.
told, like, what you're doing is important, society needs you. And it's like, it collides really hard with the
Yeah, and then
world,
you hit the
you
brick
know?
wall of like
Of
YouTube.
just, like, people being like, I mean, I was just talking to you about this
Mm,
preponderance of podcasts that are
mhm.
out there where it's 2 dipshits like
Hey,
us
look at
just
this.
reading somebody else's work.
Yeah.
And, like, I have had my book that I spent ye my first book that I spent years working on that is, like, a deep investigative journalism. I've had podcasts read passages of that book on their podcast, and they've are so much more financially successful than me.
Yeah,
They have made more money off my book than I ever will. And so I think that that's like the cruelty of journalism, is that you're like really devoted to a thing. So
yeah,
I think that it's important. It has to change. It can't stay stagnant forever. But
yeah.
I don't know what the answer is. One answer, I think, is that there are these places like the New York Times that have a
Mhm.
ton of money. Please, I pray to you, do not send your reporter to the West. Do not have them live out their Western dreams for the weekend and put
Right.
on a cowboy hat and slide and fall on the ice in Malheur. Like, ask people like us who are out here trying to do something, partner with us, more partnerships in media,
Yeah.
and taking all that Wordle money, spread it around. Like, you know?
It's true, it's true, and, like, look, you're gonna get better reporting out of it, and,
Yeah.
I think I would preach this all the time when I was at OPB is, like, the era of competition media is over, and, I will say to any reporter or editor I meet that's like, "Oh, I love the stuff you do." I'm like, "Yeah, let's, like, talk to me, like, you got a story, like, let's figure out how we can work together," because, like, um that's the only way journalism is gonna get through this and figure out what it is next and how it can be financially successful, or, while we're waiting for lawmakers to realize that you shouldn't have trillion-dollar companies that are profiting off of everything that, we produce
Yeah.
as the foundation of their product and us receive 0 benefit for it, so
Yeah. 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 That'd be awesome to receive a small benefit.
a fraction.
just, just like, I don't know, coffee, dinner.
Look,
I don't know.
and okay, like, I'll make the pitch, like, I think people should support the Western Edge because, like, look, when you support the Western Edge, you know where your money goes to? Your money goes to us filing public records requests. It goes to us, like, driving out to places and paying, $400 in gasoline or whatever the fuck it costs now to drive there. But, um, you know, uh, it's like we are reporters and we are going to use that money for reporting. We're not having company retreats. We're not, having ping pong tables in the office. We we
We
are
don't have an
basically
office.
we don't have an office. We spend the money on journalism. I think that's what journalists need to do is say like, "Hey, just give me a little bit of money to do this and I'm going to work my ass off." I mean, I think that's one benefit of what we're doing is like I wake up every day and I'm like, "Hell yes, like I'm going to make phone calls today cuz this is fun. I like doing my job." I was on the phone for like 6 hours straight today.
We
Uh
delayed our podcast by 2 hours because you were on the phone, which,
on
I'm
the phone.
mad about. Like, gave me more time to write my story.
Exactly, exactly. So, I think that's the best pitch I can make is like supporting journalism, supporting journalists that are really passionate about doing journalism. And, that's gonna matter in these local places. Find the person who's in your community who's like, "Yeah, I love this stuff. I wanna do it." Like, help support them because they're gonna be more valuable to you in the long run probably than, the person who lives on the East Coast who occasionally flies in for the murder story or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't have any good parting message other than I really hope that the reporters in Roseburg get together and start a thing.
Yeah,
And
they
when they
should.
do, we should partner with them. Like, that would
Yeah,
be rad. I would love to
reach
help
out.
how we can. Like,
Reach out. I will help you start a thing. I know it's scary, but
yeah.
who cares? If not now, when?
Yeah. Yeah, man. All right.
Alright.
That's it. Thanks
Alright,
for
bye.
joining us.